Hello. Joining me on screen right here is Brad East. Brad is an associate professor of theology at Abilene Christian University. He is also the author of The Church, A Guide to the People of God, The Church's Book, Theology of Scripture in Ecclesial Context, and The Doctrine of Scripture. His essays have been published in numerous academic journals, as well as the Christian Century, Christianity Today, Commonweal, First Things, the Los Angeles Review of Books, The Point, and many, many more. Publishing with Erdmans, Brad East is releasing a book titled Letters to a Future Saint, and that will be publishing on October 1st. So thanks for joining us, Brad.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So right out of the gate, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about yourself. If you could explain your research interests, your position at Abilene, maybe your favorite course that you've taught.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah. I'm finishing my 7th year teaching theology to undergrads here at Abilene Christian University. That is in for those who don't know, that's in West Texas, about 3 hours due west from Dallas, Fort Worth. I did my PhD in systematic theology, and my research has primarily been about two things. On the one hand, the doctrine of Scripture, and on the other hand, the doctrine of the church, so bibliology and ecclesiology. And my work so far has been about either or both in connection to each other. I teach a number of courses for undergrads here. Largely, they are gen ed, meaning they're for students from every major and background. And probably my favorite one is a course in ecclesiology that's an upper level elective for majors of all kinds.
So my next question for you is specific to the book. Why did you bring Letters to a Future Saint into the world? Who is this book for? And could you just explain a little bit, about the premise of the book?
Yeah, it's arisen out of teaching here at ACU, and I have students who come from many different backgrounds, but the overwhelming majority are Bible Belt, self-identified Christians, typically non-denominational evangelicals, though not exclusively. They grew up, I would put it, in the orbit of church, sometimes going to church, sometimes sort of going a couple times a year, sometimes not at all going, but still identifying as a Christian. And these students are extremely open to not just the gospel, but to deep theological learning. But they often, not always, but they often have just never progressed from what I would, in the Bible's words, from milk to meat, or maybe even they haven't even gotten the milk yet. And so there were really two reasons for this book. And that first one was seeing in class a real need for something accessible for folks in high school, college, or after college in their 20s and 30s to be able to have a kind of catechesis. That's not a word I use much in the actual book because it's meant to be readable by these folks. But this book is catechetical. It's meant to instruct young people and people of all ages in the faith.
Great, thank you. And something really interesting about this book, too, is the structure of it. It's formatted in a way that the narrator is writing letters. So it's an epistolary catechism, which I thought was really interesting. It's a really unique thing about the book. So if you would you mind just explaining a little bit more why you chose that format?
Yeah. Two reasons, one primary, one secondary. The primary reason was I had a bunch of young people in my life be baptized around the same time, in and around COVID, during COVID, and maybe just after. And four were nephews, 3 were godchildren. They were all very young, some like babies, but some, middle to upper elementary. And for all of them, I wrote them a letter on the day of their baptism, not to be read when they're, not to be read at this moment, on that day, a little bit above where they were right then, but to be read soon while they were still in the house and growing up. And I really enjoyed it. It was an instructive exercise because it forced me, a PhD, a theologian, to write on a single page to a child who might read this at age 8, 10, or 12, what it means today that you're being baptized. And it almost became a kind of spiritual habit or discipline. Like, okay, can I do this? If I recall, I think it's C.S. Lewis who says, if someone like me can't put into words that anybody can understand, any adult can understand, a specific doctrine of the faith, then I don't understand it yet because I'm using jargon as a kind of crutch. And that was the second reason. So on the one hand, I'm seeing these students in my classroom who really need to be catechized. They love Jesus. They're open to the Bible. They're really hungry. They are not hostile, but they don't know a lot, and they want to know a lot. They want to know more. And then on the other hand, I was doing this thing with younger children, not 18-year-olds, but 8-year-olds and younger. And I was like, well, what if I put these together and wrote a kind of catechesis for this 18 to 25-year-old demographic that we read and hear and maybe personally have experienced so much regarding sort of deconstruction or drifting away from the church. Well, instead of complaining about that, what if I try to head it off at the pass and do something positive? The secondary reason is also that this form is much more personal. The letters are not long. There are almost 100 letters, but that's because they're all short. Some of them are a little more than a couple paragraphs. Some of them are a little bit longer. I tried to aim for 600, 700, 800, 900 words per letter, somewhere in that range. And so I wanted it to be accessible both at the level of my vocabulary, length of sentences, jargon, but also, it's intimidating for someone this age to read a 25-page letter, a long chapter. That's intimidating. But if it's a page and a half or 2 pages, then those are bite size. Those go down easier. And so I felt like the marriage of form and content worked at that level too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it makes me think, as somebody who was growing up and, finding out where I was as a Christian, this would have been a book that would have been perfect for me, just as somebody who needed that little extra guidance, somebody who was spiritually hungry. So I can definitely see how this would be incredibly and immensely helpful to that target demographic that you were mentioning a little bit earlier. Yeah. So Brad, one final question for you. As folks read your book, what is one hope that you have for them? Like, what's the big key takeaway that you hope to leave readers with?
That's a difficult question. I might cheat
Sorry
and
to
give you
put you
more
on
than
the spot.
yeah,
Yeah.
I might give you more than one.
Sure.
I open and close. Readers will see. I open and close with stories of martyrdom, and that's not because certainly not because Christianity is masochistic. It's also not because most Christians end up capital M martyrs, dying for the faith, giving their lives. But it is because Christianity has stakes. And the gospel is about life and death. And the only reason to be a Christian is if it is worth living for and therefore worth dying for. And my venture in the book, my gambit, is I want to show an open-minded reader. This is not apologetics. I'm not giving arguments for any of this stuff. I'm presuming a kind of curiosity, openness, hunger. That other stuff other people can take care of. That's not my business in this book. I'm assuming you kind of want to follow Jesus, but you might be on the fence or not know much. Maybe even you're a little bit lukewarm. And Jesus says he's going to spit you out of his mouth if you're lukewarm. I'm the one saying, well, let me get you hot. Don't be cold. Don't be lukewarm. This is something that saints, doctors, nuns, monks, missionaries, pastors, ordinary folks in the pews. I have a letter where I talk about my wife's grandmas and my grandmas and their ordinary lives of faithfulness to Christ. Man, even if somebody read this book and said, I'm not a Christian and I'm not going to be a Christian, but I would want them to say, I understand why someone would be. I understand why there are people in this world who say in life and death, I belong to God, and who would give their lives. That's my highest, my most sincere hope for the book. And obviously I hope that it does nudge people towards discipleship, towards, as I call it in the book, small m martyrdom, which means a life of sacrificial witness to Christ.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, incredibly well said. Thank you, Brad. It's truly been a pleasure just getting to know you and a little bit more about your book. Brad East, Letters to a Future Saint, Foundations of Faith for the Spiritually Hungry, is publishing with Erdmans on October 1st, 2024. We would strongly encourage you to grab your copy today. So thanks again, Brad.
Thank you.